So one of the biggest questions I get asked is, what is the right shaft for me as a golfer? There's different weights, there's different lengths, there's some different torques, some different flexes, and there's a minefield out there for you as golfers, maybe choosing what is the right option. But in this particular video, we're going to take a look at some shafts, and in particular the new Cobra LTDx driver and their stock shaft offerings. We're going to test each one of these and provide you with some numbers and maybe the differences of what certain shaft weights and flexes and characteristics can possibly change with the ball flight. So make sure you stay to the end of this video because we've got a super tip to help you add more yards to your tee shots, but also create more control. So as I mentioned, we're going to take a look at the Cobra, the LTDx driver head. I'm going to keep the same head in this test for these shafts, and I've got three of Cobra's stock shaft options. So we've got a lightweight option, we've got a midweight, we've got a slightly heavier option. So really these are trying to dial in or throw a blanket over as many different types of golfers out there. Now, don't get me wrong, there's obviously other options above and beyond these three, but typically if you go on the website or many stockists, they will typically hold one of these three shafts, if not maybe a couple of options or possibly all three. So we've got a UST Helium, which is a little bit lighter, a little bit softer. We've got the Hazardous Smoke IM10, and then we've got the Hazardous Smoke RDX. So all slightly different in the characteristics of these shafts. There's a little bit of difference of weights. We're going to test all three right now and provide you with some numbers. So I'm using the LTDx, the one with a weighted screw at the back of the head, 9-degree head. I'm going to keep that head the same, obviously, for all three of these shafts. So we're going to kick things off with the UST Helium. So this is a lightweight option, typically plays a little bit softer, a little bit more higher launch, and maybe a little bit more higher spinning in its characteristics. So typically would suit more somebody with a slightly slower swing speed who's trying to get the ball sort of launching, wants to get the shaft to sort of kick in a little bit more and give him a little bit more sort of feedback. So clearly a shaft that probably isn't suited to my speed, but to keep this test as equal as I can, I've got the three shafts and they're all in the same flex. They're all stiff. Now I typically am extra stiff, but I haven't got X in all of these. They don't do a Helium in an X. So to keep it the same, I'm going to use a stiff flex in all three of these shafts, and obviously the same head at 9-degree. Okay. Not too bad an opener, a little bit off the bottom of the club. So obviously the things we're going to look at in this test is things like maybe spin, maybe sort of ball speed, sometimes club head speed, so we're changing the weight of the shaft, maybe how the shaft weight can influence a little bit of speed of the club head, how that then possibly translates into ball speed. I also want to have a look at dispersion as well. So sometimes maybe shafts that are a little bit too soft for a certain golfer might create a slightly larger dispersion, and so on. So we're going to have a look at a few different aspects. And this sort of process is possibly something that you'll be doing through your fitting process. You know, if you're with a fitter there going in that buying process of a driver, you may be trying a few different options and you'll be looking at things, you know, maybe with TrackMan or other launch monitors, things like dispersion rings, looking at how you're optimizing your sort of ball flight in a way for you as a delivery. Okay, that's a pretty good strike there, just working a tiny bit up the left-hand side. Struck that really well though there. A little bit sort of higher in that toe. Yeah, so that's an interesting one there. So I caught that a little bit sort of slightly higher in that toe section. Got a little bit of that right to left. You see that spin just dropped down quite a bit. Again, strike can really overpower really what maybe a shaft could do in terms of a spin number. But again, you've got to look at this as averages because we're not always, even for me, we're always going to hit that same part of the club face. So you've got to look at those averages and take into account of those, maybe those slight mishits depending on where on your face you're hitting it and what does that then do to the spin. Again, tying all that into how you deliver the golf club. Again, not a bad strike up that left-hand side, maybe a touch higher in that club face. Again, I reckon that'll pull a bit of spin off that as well. Yeah, there we go, 1700. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a light, very much a lightweight sort of shaft. I can feel that, you know, again, you respond to certain clubs in different ways as an individual in terms of the weight, the balance of the golf club. I can obviously feel this a little bit lighter up in that shaft. It does feel light, feels like I can move it. Club head speed around that sort of 130, which to be honest for me is quite sort of typical. So characteristics of the Helium is it's a low kick point. We've got sort of a high sort of launch and a sort of high spin characteristics of the shaft. We're seeing something a little bit different there through my strike though. So I think this is really sort of ties in and probably proves a point that you've got to go and test this yourself and your delivery. Sometimes when you look at sort of makeups of shafts online, high launch, high spin, you expect to sort of see that, but not necessarily depend on your strike as we've just explained. Okay, that's a little bit off the bottom of the club. Won't be as long, I don't think, with that particular strike. Yeah, see that spin move up a little bit, just lost that a little bit to the right. Okay, one more and then we'll move into the Hazardous Smoke. Oh, that's a good strike. A little bit higher ball flight, smidge up the left. It's to be in the air for a long time, that. That could be some good numbers, that, to fair. 280 carry, decent. Okay, right, let's move on. Okay, so same head, now moved into the Hazardous, the Smoke, the IM10. So this now is coming in at 66 grams in weight in the stiff flex. Now, obviously it says 60 gram on the actual shaft, but that weight does tend to sort of change a little bit depending on the flex that you've got. They tend to sort of round it up as a whole number, so 60 doesn't always mean it's absolutely 60 grams. So this is actually 66 grams, so a bit of a jump in weight from the Helium, which was in the 50 gram area, sort of high 50s, should I say, in the gram area. This is a little bit more mid-spin now, mid-launch, mid-spin. So we might sort of expect to see, again, subject to strike, a little bit more of a sort of a flatter sort of launch angle here in comparison to the Helium, and maybe a little bit more lower on the spin. And straight away there, I can feel a little bit more weight there now. And we're talking like possibly like maybe sort of less than 10 grams here in actual weight, but you know, you put 10 grams in your hand, it feels absolutely nothing, doesn't it? But when you put it in a golf club, you can definitely sort of feel it. And not everybody can feel it, and we're not trying to sort of trick you, and you should be feeling this. Everybody's a little bit different on what they do feel, but I can just feel that little bit of difference of weight, a little bit more weight up into that handle. Oh, that's a solid first hit. That's a super flight. Looks to be a little bit lower there, looks to be a little bit more penetrating. So 2-2 spin, 280 carry. That was a really nice set of numbers on that first one. So the other thing that's going to change between these shafts is also the torque, and the torque is basically the twist in the shaft. So imagine when you're getting those slight little missed hits, we're going to get some twisting of the head, and basically it's going to twist around this shaft. So for me, with a bit more speed, when I'm slightly misstrike that Helium, we're probably going to see more of a twist. And again, thinking about that dispersion and maybe a little bit of gear effect as well, it can be a little bit more affected. So this is a little bit of a tighter in terms of that torque, a little bit less torque in comparison to the Helium. So maybe as to us as a feel, it might just feel a little bit more stable. And again, that's a really good ball flight. Looks to be holding its line. Two nice sort of shots to kick things off with the Smoke IM10. So clearly this is fitting a little bit more towards what I would like to sort of feel, a bit more suited to my sort of speed. Definitely feel it being a little bit more stable. Again, this is all depending on your own individual clubhead speed. This is obviously my testing. Ooh, right, it's a little bit off the bottom. That wasn't as good as the first two shots. So that launch just comes down a little bit through that slightly low in the face strike, but the spin hasn't shot up, and I haven't actually lost any sort of distance there either. Oh, just turn that up the left a fraction, but I'll tell you what's another good hit there. That looks to be pretty long as well. Yeah, 280 carry, very similar again. A little bit up the left, so probably straight away there. A couple of really good strikes there. One was a bit low, but you can see the total distance very, very consistent, and starting to be a little bit tight on that dispersion. One more hit with this. Okay, so there's some shots with the Smoke IM10. Feels much more solid to me. Some really consistent front to back dispersions, a little bit tight on that left to right dispersion with that particular shaft. Okay, so finally moving into the Hazardous RDX Smoke, and this is a Hazardous Blue RDX. So this is a little bit more of a lower spin profile, so maybe still keeping that mid to maybe high launch, but a lower spin, and they do that by making the tip section of this stiffer basically. So typically more suited to someone with that slightly higher tempo, quicker club head speed to create that stability in that tip section, which is going to control maybe the loft delivery, a little bit more control of the head, possibly to tighten up the strike for that slightly quicker player. So potentially this is more aligned to my sort of speed. Be interesting to sort of see. Weight wise, very similar to the Smoke. It's in that sort of mid sort of 60 gram area. And I think it's just straight away there, just making a couple of little swishes with it. Again, you can feel the stability in the shaft there, a little bit more sort of stable, which I would typically like to sort of feel in a way. We'll soon see on some numbers and some performance. Again, same head, 90 degree. Oh, that felt solid. That's quite a high flight, mid to high flight. Be interesting to see that. Good ball speed, good launch, great spin. Wow, that's the longest one up to now, isn't it? 287. on that carry number. And obviously you can't feel this, you know, I'm feeling this, and again, this is where I would always say to you, go and get into that fitting scenario, try some different shafts in that same session. You'll appreciate the sort of feels between each of these weights and the way the sort of bend profiles are. But straight away that feels much more stable to me. You know, again, it is a little bit more aligned to my swing speed, but just that stability, the solidness feel. Again, not a bad strike. Very similar ball speed, very similar launch, very similar spin, like that, 286. A little bit slightly different pattern of shot direction on the first two, which is interesting. We'll see if that pattern stays there. Good, decent strike. Touch left that one a little bit lower, just slightly close the face potentially on that one. It's a little bit more club head speed now. I think I'm just starting to feel a bit more confident with this because I know the shaft's more stable. I can let it go a little bit more. Not that I'm trying to, but probably just feeling a little bit more confident with this shaft. And that's a really good ball flight. Really good ball flight. Again, there's that ball speed. There's that spin consistency, and there's that carry. Feels really solid, does that? We'll hit one more, and then we'll jump into some numbers, and then obviously we're gonna have give you that really hot tip that I do, to be honest, is something that I think about that helps you hit a few more extra yards. Yeah, big difference. Obviously a bit more aligned to my speed, so we'd expect to see some better results, but I think this is a really good example. That's another great shot there. Another good example of how shaft can really affect the ball speed and everything like that. But let's look a little bit deeper at some numbers. We're going to look at dispersion, strike, everything like that, and just compare it and see the difference between those three shafts. And don't forget, stay to the end of this video. Super hot tip for you to hit some more yards with your driver, but extra control as well. Stay tuned. Okay, so obviously we're going to start off the dispersions, which you've been seeing has been going along there. Clearly the blue there, just been a little bit longer on those shots as we've seen, and maybe just a bit tighter there, definitely tighter than that helium, which obviously was too soft for me. So maybe you can just see the differences as a torque increases, maybe a tip softness gets a bit too soft for a certain speed, then you can see the dispersion rings maybe just get lost a little bit. And then I want to look at the strikes over the 5 shots hit with each of those shafts. So this is the heat patch on the helium strikes. So quite central, but you can see quite a difference of up and down misses. So much more in the bottom of the golf club there in comparison to maybe the top. So moving it up and down there, you know, with that slightly softer torque, slightly softer shaft, we're going to get a bit more sort of droop in the shaft there, a little bit more kick at the bottom. So this can all affect the height and basically maybe a slightly more inconsistent delivery of that club head for my particular speed. As soon as we move into the smoke, things got a little bit tighter. There we go. You can see that heat patch there, much more collective in a similar sort of area. So a little bit firmer in the playability of that shaft, firming up a little bit in the tip, and adding a little bit more weight does give that stability, control in that head. Then we move into the RDX Smoke Blue, and you can see just slightly better again. Again, very nice and concise in one area, and a little bit more tighter again. And then looking at side on bird's eye view, so again, helium in the white, you can see the peak of the heights there, a few more up that left-hand side, one bailed out to the right, so a little bit inconsistent maybe on that side of things. We're moving then into the smoke, you can see a little bit, it's very similar sort of, to be fair, on that launch, looking there a little bit tighter on that left to right dispersion as well as that front to back. And then moving into the blue RDX, which is a little bit more mid to high launch but lower spin. Again, things tightened up a little bit more, didn't it? But very similar sort of window. Okay, then when we look at the numbers, these are the averages out of the 5 we've hit with each one. So we can see the helium on the bottom, the lighter one, actually didn't create as much club head speed. Maybe because I'm reacting to the shaft a little bit. I know it's a little bit more softer, so probably, I didn't intentionally, but subconsciously just eased off the gas a little bit there just to make sure I didn't lose too much control, possibly. So 112, 162, 11 launch, 2-3 spin. So quite a low spin, as I mentioned. It's some a little bit toey, a little bit high, which obviously pulls some spin off. But you know, 275 on that carry distance there. We look at going into the smoke IM10. You can see a little bit more club head speed. Probably just felt a little bit more comfortable, which I did mention that. That translated into a little bit more ball speed. Similar launch and very similar spin, which is interesting. And obviously a few more extra yards through that extra little bit of speed. But obviously the dispersion rings got a little bit tighter. And then moving into the RDX Smoke, which was a little bit more aligned to me. I did feel a bit more confident. That's something I'm more used to. Probably there, let it go a little bit more, even though it was a little bit heavier. I actually swung it a little bit quicker, so there's an interesting one in terms of the weight. Light doesn't always mean more speed, but then I can translate that into some ball speed there, so 165, similar sort of launch, which out of all of those, to be honest, and the spin, again, very, very similar, just a fraction lower. So there is some differences there, but you can see the differences from the highest to lowest of the spin. It's much more tighter on the sort of numbers there for me. Carry distance obviously increased again. So some different results there, or some different end results in terms of that distance and that dispersion between those three shafts. Okay, let's give you a really simple tip, and this is going to help to create some more speed, some better sequencing and some more yards, but with control. So from my experience when I'm coaching with a driver, everybody wants to hit the driver further, don't they? You tend to sort of see some really fast club head speeds, which speed is great and we know the benefits of generating speed, but maybe sometimes we compromise a little bit of control. But what I would say is the backswing tends to be too fast, so very snatchy away in a bid to maybe create speed and a bid to hit this further than your mates when you're out on that golf course. And sequencing is then gone completely out the window. Strike goes, and we could probably just see there as we move strike around, it really affects ball speed and spin and also accuracy as well. So I would always say to somebody who's wanting to increase a little bit of speed, get some really good sequencing, some good strike, and add in some speed and some distance, is to control and, if anything, slow down the backswing. Okay, so probably you'll notice with myself then, one of the biggest comments I get is how smooth my swing is, and yet I hit the ball so far. And I think I really always focus on trying to keep the smoothness of the takeaway. I know I can generate a little bit of speed, and sometimes when I go chasing a bit of speed, I do it through going quick, and I just literally hit it all over the place. I really struggle with my strikes. So I would always sort of say to me, you know, let's slow up that backswing, let's complete that backswing, complete your turn, get a smoother transition, and then build that speed up. And if you're going to think about increasing speed, I would say to you, increase it in the follow through. I know it sounds strange, ball's gone, but what you'll actually do is turn it on more through the bottom of the swing into the finish, which is where you want it, and not through that backswing and then through that downswing and being a bit sort of snatchy. So smooth backswing, I guarantee you'll hit the ball a bit further and probably create some better sequencing and some more accuracy. Smooth away from the ball, and then you can hit through. Take that one to the range, have a work on it, and I'll pretty much guarantee you'll get some better strikes and a little bit more consistency and hopefully some extra yards for you.